I feel very strongly that since they changed so much, and since they have been part of our lives for so long, there is a point where we have to stop and think, who are these people and how did they do that? Tune In is the first volume of a 3-volume series called All These Years, which attempts to tell, in a way that it's never been told before, the real story of the Beatles, and a contextual telling of their stories, so that it's the Beatles in a setting in the period in which they were, living all these years, basically. So it's a biography, it's a history, it's comprehensive, it's deep, it's scholarly, but it's also funny, like they were. It's a real page turner because they did such interesting things, and it's an attempt to really get this right once and for all. There are an awful lot of books on the Beatles, all these, and a great many more besides. But I've always felt that the one that their story deserves has yet to be written. People would think, this is ridiculous. This is only the first part of the Beatles story. You've written, in the end, nearly 800,000 words. And that is, quite obviously vast amounts of stuff that no one's interested in, but it isn't like that. This is it's not just me that thinks it as well. This is a truly extraordinary story full of extraordinary people doing extraordinary things all the time. The Beatles were very funny. Well, they didn't suddenly become funny when they made A Hard Day's Night. They didn't suddenly become artistically progressive when they were making Revolver or Sgt. Pepper. They didn't suddenly develop a personality when they went on television in 1963. This is who they always were. And they were always doing all that kind of interesting stuff, progressive stuff, making things up as they went along, not adhering to other people's rules, even when they weren't known. So the same dynamic Beatles that are going to appear in the years that people do know about, they're in this book too. So the book is written actually very lean. There's nothing in there that doesn't need to be there in order to understand who these people were. It's absolutely rooted in documentation. My number one collection, the number one aspect of my collection is information. Letters, contracts, every kind of possible piece of documentation. And if you use that, then you've got a very solid grounding for being correct. And that's where it starts, really. The essence of this project is we're cutting no corners. Absolutely no corners are being cut, because what's the point? It's never going to be done as thoroughly again. So we might as well do absolutely everything we can to get it right. The Beatles are this legend. They are this immense thing that they're just like, they're almost not people anymore. They're just John, Paul, George and Ringo. They're the Beatles. They're gods. They're not. They're just people living lives like all of us live. But they just take different paths, different directions. They have different goals, and ultimately it gets them higher than they could ever imagine. But they are just people, and this is a very human story. So I'm taking the reader always inside their houses, inside the clubs, inside the van when they were travelling around. And with them very much real at the centre of it. It's their story. It's great. This is what I want to do. This actually, I kind of feel this is what I was put on the planet to do. I'm meant to be doing this. So here I am.